What does the angry metal guy say about all this?
Wasn't ready for that bit. We could find out. Let's just see if he has anything to say about it. Angry metal guy, Lacuna Coil.
Let's see. Before you tell me about that, if there's anything else I can share. So
He
reception.
did review it. This ought to be fun.
Several reviewers highlighted the album's ability to evolve Lacuna Coil's sound while maintaining their signature gothic metal style. Metacritic normalized, which gave it an 82 on 6 reviews, generally favorable. I talked about Kerrang, said a bold, heavier approach, and described I Wish You Were Dead as a gothic anthem, sharp-fanged with irony, which I would agree with.
Last paragraph from our good buddy, the Angry Metal Guy. Overall, I can tell you he gave it a 2.5, which is a mix. This is out of 5, so it's about 50%. But he says, at the end of the day, I can't say I'm disappointed with Sleepless Empire. There was a little chance of it eclipsing Lacuna Coil's landmark records. However, if my instincts are correct about how Lacuna Coil evolves, and I believe that they are, I suspect we're simply witnessing the dying breaths of their current sound. Unfortunately, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, finish.
Unfortunately, Sleepless Empire isn't the explosive send-off it should have been to once more careen Lacuna Coil head first into new territory. Yet I find myself charmed even still, such that I remain fascinated by what their future might hold.
So one thing that my girlfriend said I thought was interesting about this, again, she's coming into it cold, not a fan of this kind of music. She was like, all these tracks sound the same. And I'm like, well, they are playing in a certain style, which made me think about that for a moment. I could have pressed her on like her love of the Toadies and Liz Phair and some of the shit she listens to. And like, you're telling me these all don't sound the same either. Like, how many fucking Liz Phair songs are that distinct from one another? But I, wanted to sleep with her, so I didn't argue. But yeah, thank you. You do learn after a few years. However, with you guys, who I'm not going to sleep with tonight, I could raise that question. Like, how do you stay loyal to a style and not piss off your fans, but also sound distinct enough to set yourself apart and attract attention? And I don't know the answer to that question. Like, we've reviewed a lot of albums and told a lot of Bathroom Stories.
Yes, we have.
And one of the things that we talked about, we even came up with a word for it, was like, oh, this is kind of samey. Mm-hmm. And it's half the reason why over the years we abandoned that format, because ultimately we'd run out of shit to say about an album. I don't know how, like, when I think about some of the, I'll give you probably the best example of this. Metallica, after 5 albums, changed their sound and tried something different for a few years, and then they kind of went back to it, to debatable degrees of success. But that's Metallica. Like, how many bands can pull off what Metallica did? How many bands can pull off what the Beatles did? Some of these individual artists, like say an Elvis Presley or Johnny Cash, can try experimenting with different sounds and do different things to also varying degrees of success. Like, sometimes you get like an average Slayer fan who just wants the same fucking album over and over again, but that's not going to attract any new attention. Yeah. And I'm not even sure you're going to retain all your fans doing that. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Coop. I'm sure you've got some non-dick related stories to share with us.
Yeah, I was about to say you're getting to my neighborhood here.
Yeah.
I do kind of feel like, to a degree, it's not a problem for you to have a certain distinct sound. Like, even Motorhead actually has songs that are a lot slower, more introspective, and quieter than just what you think of with like Ace of Spades and stuff like that.
The Ace of Spades.
Even when you Spades, which Nick told me he apparently had a song where he had a dream where Lemmy was singing about his balls or something like that. I don't know why, but I was just like, all right,
well,
that's a dream.
I guess he'll never come on the podcast and tell us.
Man, we need to feed like 20 of these podcasts into Notebook LM and just say, pick all the Nick shit out and then write a song. That's what we got to do. And that right there needs to be in there.
You can work on that, Jesse.
Sure. Go ahead, Coop.
No, you're good. But there are certain corner cases, like even like Orgasmotron has a lot slower beat to it than your average song. Same with like AC/DC. There are moments where they sound different.
Well, a really great example of this would be like Green Day. You know, first of all, a lot of their stuff doesn't sound the same. Second,
It doesn't.
you know, I think they described "Good Riddance, Time of Your Life" as like the most punk rock song they could have ever written. You know, it's this like acoustic song with violins, and you know, it definitely doesn't sound like fucking Brain Stew.
Yeah.
But again, how many Green Days are out there?
Well, I think to a degree, a lot of times the reason these bands get to be where they are is because of longevity.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, so for example, like Slayer, their last few albums really weren't that great. There's a couple good songs here and there, but in a way, the fact that you can kind of put little, kind of a little bit extra shine on something you've already built that's really nice, makes it to where you can stay around for a long time and just you kind of find your niche. There are other bands though.
Passively listening to music, I'm more open to listening to a lot of the same stuff over and over again because I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to think people will watch movies. I'm not going to say anything about this. I'm not going to think about it. This is for passive entertainment. So it gets away with being samey. I don't care. I'm just looking for background noise. When I have to actually talk about something, it's part of the reason why we use only once a month now. And also, I'm very selective about what albums we're doing. I picked Lacuna Coil because Jesse has a passion for it, and I knew he talked for a while about it. So, like the next one that we're doing is, I think, like Bloodywood, because it sounds so distinctly different from anything else. Like, you know, The Who, for example, not WHO, but The Who, the Mongolian band.
The Mongolian Who.
Yeah, the Mongolian Who. I would love to talk about them. They sound way different than anything else.
I'd love for that band to cover Pinball Wizard. I'd like to hear
that's
that.
Actually, you know that.
Twang, Johnny was a real boy.
The fucking throat singing and the beat of it. That actually was. Actually meant to message y'all. I was actually wondering, like, that's something maybe we could do more often, like how we did a Gwar retrospective. That Slipknot review kind of felt like a retrospective of sorts. Yeah. Like if bringing more, at least, maybe one or two a year of that style in, because, let's say you get one expert like Mick was with Gwar as well as y'all, and Jesse loves him some Lacuna Coil, and just really kind of deep dive and listen to the other person's passion and kind of, listen in. That's just a thought I had. But
don't recommend fucking, ancient French beret beating off fucking pizza eaters. And I'm more than happy to take something that you're passionate about there, my Megadeth friend. What was it? 3 shows in a row all about Megadeth back in the day?
Well, yeah, we did a Megadeth retrospective.
Yeah, we did 2-part Megadeth retrospective, and then you used to pick a lot of the retrospectives. Now that I think about it, you picked the Killswitch Engage one. You picked Megadeth. I just picked. I picked Clutch 3 times.
Yeah. But I was just kind of thinking that. But hey, to be fair, y'all enjoyed Alcest a lot more than you thought you would.
Yeah, true. Even despite the fact that I pick on you for it. Jesse, you got any thoughts here about like distinctive styles in music and how do you probably never went over someone like my girlfriend or somebody like your wife, but I think if you're trying to make music, trying to make new fans that wouldn't necessarily be a fan of your genre, like how do you even go about doing that without completely either chasing a trend or just losing your sense of self?
Yeah, you cannot. It depends on the artist. Does the artist want to make a sacrifice for popularity versus staying true to the sound that they want? I would imagine 9 times out of 10, the artist wants to put out I shouldn't say 9 times out of 10, because I really do feel like there are a lot of pop artists that, probably choose to go with the trend at the time.
Because it's all about what's popular.
You're right, dude. Right. And in this genre, in the metal genre, we're not seeing that because a lot of people, a lot of bands want to stay true to write songs about what they want to write songs about. They aren't just changing things up. However, there have been some definite big swings and misses by some bands, and you guys mentioned Megadeth, and Risk was one of those, if I remember correctly.
That's horrible.
But I think of Clutch and how their sound evolved. They aren't actually chart-topping band, though, either.
I was going to say, like, Clutch is both the best and worst example of what we're talking about, because Clutch has developed a very dedicated, rabid fan base that will almost accept anything that they do.
They would, right?
However, have you been to a Clutch show recently? People don't love a lot of Clutch. They love Clutch,
Really?
but there are elements of Clutch, like there are certain, depending on what year you go and what crowd you gather, because I've seen them where they like everything from Blast Tyrant to about maybe the Blast Tyrant to oh gosh, what was the name of it? The one with X-ray visions.
Okay.
Psychic Warfare. Like they're okay.
Yeah.
They're okay with Blast Tyrant to Psychic Warfare for the most part. There's a lot of rock and stuff in there. You go anything after Psychic Warfare, like the more recent stuff, like Sunrise on Slaughter Beach, or if you go pre, with the exception of Elephant Riders, which by the way, so Clutch is coming back around again. I got 3 tickets. I'm taking my kids to Orlando to see Clutch when they come around.
Oh, cool.
Taking my son and my daughter. I refuse to take any more women to concerts. But so I'm taking Clutch. I'm taking my kids to go see Clutch, and they haven't been there since we were once a family, and we saw them in Tallahassee. And my daughter fell asleep under a bar, and then was hit on by a guy, and my wife had to shoo him away. She's like, she's 11. Like, oh god, there was a creep-sized hole in the wall. And then there was my son who was like in the mosh pit just getting bowled over by people who look like me and Jesse. So he's 11. He'll be 11 by this point. She'll be 14. They are sturdier people than they used to be. But I did tell them, I was just like, listen, we're going to be there. We're going to be on the floor. It's going to be fine. I'm not going to push you in the pit, Lily. You can hang in the back. If you're far enough back from the pit, you'll be fine. You won't be jostled too much. You'll be all right. However, if you happen to hear Elephant Riders, run. just to save yourself.
Elephant Riders.
My God!
What was the big one they didn't play for the longest time because they were worried
Binge and
about
Purge,
safety?
which they played at Rockville last year.
Okay,
and it was glorious. I was considering one of my many Terry Funk retirements at the time.
Forever and ever.
But I would say the exception to most rules when it comes to Clutch is that if you hear Elephant Riders or the Soap Makers, if you fucking hear Soap Makers, put your mouth guard in because you're about to get punched in the face by everyone. Anyway, just to kind of finish up this topic and then we'll move on to the next song. Yeah, it just got me, this album and my girlfriend's comments on it and just my general sort of thing about music had really had me thinking about how hard it is to be a band now. When I think music was more controlled in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, pre-internet, and genres weren't quite, every genre of music wasn't quite so saturated. I think you could afford to stand out a little bit more, even though your stuff might have been a little within the box. Now I don't understand how fucking bands make it at all. Right. How do you differentiate yourself in amongst the noise?
Well, not only that, but once you differentiate yourself, how do you even make any fucking money?